Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're here at Exchange Place in Jersey City, barely a mile from Ground Zero, and our National 9/11 Memorial to honor American lives lost to terrorism. It's fitting that we do this here, across the river from the Freedom Tower in Lower Manhattan, as we remember nearly 3,000 men and women and 750 New Jerseyans who were senselessly murdered on September 11th. As you all know, late last year, President Biden signed legislation that included my Fairness for 9/11 Families Act. This bill, and the long road it has taken towards becoming law, is a crowning achievement, the result of years of dedicated advocacy by families who have lost loved ones to terrorism and state sponsors of terror. And I'm honored to be joined today by so many who have been involved in this fight. After all, it was your dogged activism, your relentless pursuit, that gathered support, strong support on both sides of the aisle to get this done. They are the reason that we had so many co-sponsors join Senator Booker and I on this bill. And without all of you, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you. Thank you for turning a painful set of circumstances into a purposeful mission. At its heart, this legislation is straightforward. It delivers long overdue relief to 9/11 families who were previously unfairly excluded from the U.S. Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Act, while adding the families of victims of the 1983 Beirut Marine Barracks bombing and the 1996 Khobar Towers attack. And in addition, the law provides relief for all of the U.S. victims of terror in the fund by ensuring everyone benefits from the dollars we are injecting into the fund. As I've said before, for many of these families, it has been years, if not decades, of waiting to get the relief this bill provides. Worse still, nearly all of them have had to jump through endless hoops and hurdles in their pursuit of justice. And I know that struggle will still continue. Today I'm proud to have various individuals from these families, some who will speak, others who are joining us, who will detail their personal experiences with this journey. But ask any of the family members we have here today, ask any of the 9/11 widows and children who were unjustifiably excluded from the Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund, and they will tell you exactly why this legislation is such a big deal. I've always said that these spouses and children should have been included in the fund on day one. It's unconscionable that they were kept separate from other terror victims' families. When the mistake was finally fixed by Congress in 2019, the delay had already caused them to miss 2 rounds of distribution. This law, the Fairness for 9/11 Families Act, provides them the compensation they are owed and the restitution they should have received years ago. It does so while at the same time correcting an injustice that affected many families that lost loved ones in the Beirut Marine Barracks bombing and the Khobar Towers bombing. These families were prevented from joining the fund unless they gave up their judgments in ongoing litigation. Today, we also allow them to join the fund and provide a pathway to deliver them the catch-up payments they deserve. In all, our legislation provides $6 billion in relief for U.S. victims of state-sponsored terrorism. Once the catch-up payments for the Marine families and Khobar Tower families are set, we expect nearly $2 billion will be reserved for all of the other victims in the fund. This money will go towards the family members of Iran hostages, embassy bombing victims, and the victims of the USS Cole attacks. Lastly, we also included language to guide our future work on this issue to the Government Accountability Office. Thanks to this legislation, the GAO will soon begin work on a report that outlines how we continue to do the right thing by these victims in the future, including how to increase contributions to the fund, which is persistently underfunded. All told, the Fairness for 9/11 Families Act is the definition, in my mind, of common sense legislation. As the name implies, it provides fairness and justice for families. But for a moment, I'd like to address those who lost a loved one whether in Beirut, in Tehran, or in Lower Manhattan directly. I know that not a day goes by when you don't think of the loss that you have left behind. I know the time may have passed, and life may go on, but the legacy of their lives remains. And so, the victims at the heart of this bill, your loved ones, lived from sea to shining sea. They had homes on the shores of New Jersey and among the amber waves of grain in Nebraska. They lived in big cities and small towns. They went to work, they gave back, they served their communities and their country in countless different ways. But on October 23rd of 1983, on June 25th of 1996, on September 11th of 2001, they were killed simply for being an American. They were killed because they wore our uniform and defended our Constitution. They were killed because they sang our national anthem and pledged allegiance to our flag. And for some of them, they were killed because they were our first responders, rushing towards the danger, running into a burning building that flew the stars and stripes on the roof. In short, no matter who they were or where they came from, they were targeted and killed simply for their identity as citizens of the United States of America. We can never forget them. After all, remembrance is our solemn duty as fellow citizens. But the values that bind us to them, the core American tenets of freedom, tolerance, justice, equality, and hope, that is what today is about. We know we cannot begin to bear the loss that your families have endured, but while words may feel small compared to the absence of a father's laugh, a brother's hug, a husband's love, we can do more than share your grief. As a community, we can extend our hand. As a Congress, we can seek justice for their deaths. After all, it takes a special courage to do what you have done, which is to turn pain into purpose, anger into action. As the late Congressman John Lewis once said, democracy is not a state, it is an act. And so to all of you who have been speaking up on behalf of 9/11 families, to see the individuals who are here today, that is our democracy working at its finest. That's what it means to be an engaged citizen, a proud patriot, a true American. I'm honored to have been able to deliver this for you and for all the victims of state-sponsored terrorism who will be able to rest a little easier because of this legislation. And with that, let me turn it over to Jacqueline Sacuzo, who is speaking on behalf of Angela.
Thank you, sir. My name is Janlyn Scouso, and at 39 years old, I was left a single parent of 4 small children. My husband was a first responder in the fire department with hazardous materials unit. He died along with 18 other men that day. His house alone had 53 children without fathers. Through becoming an advocate in this journey, I met Angela Mistrulli, who sadly lost her father as well. He was working on Windows of the World, and she has become a very, very strong advocate for the families working with your office. She unfortunately could not be here today, so I'm reading a letter from her. Compassion, perseverance, sacrifice, integrity, respect, and empathy. These are the characteristics of a champion. For the last 21 years, Senator Menendez has been a champion for the children and spouses of the September 11th attacks. His steadfast commitment to successfully pass 3 separate bipartisan pieces of legislation has rectified an egregious miscarriage of justice. We set out on this journey to bring a modicum of justice to 5,364 children and widows who were the only victims to ever be wrongfully excluded from the United States Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund. Through this journey, many faces have changed, and we have had new supporters join in. But there has always been a consistent voice from Senator Menendez. Also joining Leader Schumer, Congressman Nadler, Congresswoman Pelosi, and Congressman Smith. Without their support over the last 7 years, we would not be standing here today. Sorry, my pages got wet in the rain. Senator Menendez and his team have become part of our families. They have heard our struggles and show empathy for the pain we continue to endure 21 years later. I sat at my daughter's dance competition last week, this is Angela, and cried while I watched the routines. I looked at the smiles on the girls' faces and the doting fathers in the stands. It brought me back to the moment in my life when my world was shattered, the futures we anticipated 21 years ago, and the dreams we were robbed of on this horrific day of an act of hatred. Many people simply say time has passed to just move on. But the truth is, we can never truly move on. Our lives were shaped through immense trauma. The innocent childhoods we were living, in a blink of an eye, were gone. Our smiles would never be as big or bright as they were prior to September 11th. We would like to spend the next 21 years missing the moments that we should have spent with our loved ones and fighting so hard for what is right. This road to fight for equality and recognition of our loss has been long and hard, and at times has even broken some of us. Having champions like Senator Menendez by our side to carry the weight of this fight when we couldn't has shown how much he truly cares. He never gave up on following through on his promise despite the many obstacles that were placed before us. We know that he will be there to ensure that we always have truth, transparency, and justice surrounding September 11th. He honors our loved ones by never forgetting. We are and will forever be grateful for his unwavering support. Thank you, Senator Menendez, again for everything you have done and continue to do for all of the children and widows of nearly 3,000 innocent lives that were taken on September 11th.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Now we'll hear from Terry Strada, who's the National Chair of 9/11 Families United.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Terry Strada. I am the National Chair for 9/11 Families United. It is my pleasure to be here today and be given the opportunity to thank Senator Menendez and his staff for their unwavering support of the 9/11 families and survivors. My husband, Tom, was 41 years old. We lived in Chatham, New Jersey. He was murdered on September 11th when our country was brutally attacked for what felt like an eternity. His smile, sense of humor, huge heart, and generosity is greatly missed by all those who knew him. His love, support, and guidance are deeply missed by me and our children, who were 7, 4, and 4 days old on that horrific day. The term "never forget" was coined after the barbaric attacks on our country, and it has a profound meaning to the 9/11 community and our country. Senator Menendez knows the meaning of the phrase, and his commitment to all of us standing here today is commendable. He is a man of integrity and compassion, and I am grateful he has never forgotten our loved ones or our pain and suffering. I first worked with the senator and his staff in 2021 when he introduced the Bipartisan 2021 9/11 Transparency Act to compel U.S. intelligence agencies to comply with court-ordered subpoenas regarding their investigations into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and its government agents, banks, government-run charities, and wealthy individuals' involvement in murdering nearly 3,000 Americans on U.S. soil. Language from that critical piece of legislation was later used in President Biden's Executive Order 14040, commanding the Department of Justice, FBI, CIA, Treasury, and State Department to conduct a full declassification review of all U.S. intelligence investigative reports concerning the kingdom and declassify all reports to the greatest extent possible. Because of Senator Menendez's dedication to the truth and accountability, along with Senators Schumer, Cornyn, and Grassley, Thousands of pages concerning the Saudis have been declassified. While there is more work to be done to achieve full transparency, without the Senator's commitment to our quest for justice, our success to date would have been much harder to achieve. Thank you, Senator Menendez, for helping ensure transparency is achieved, and I look forward to continuing working with you on this vital issue. Most recently, I've had the pleasure of working with the Senator and his staff in Washington, D.C. on the Fairness for 9/11 Families Act, which is why we are all gathered here today, to say thank you for keeping your word to the 9/11 community and ensuring spouses like myself and all children that were left out of the United States Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund will now be able to receive compensation we were unfairly previously excluded from. While in D.C., I witnessed firsthand the Senator's dedication and how eager his staff was to fix the wrongs perpetrated on the 9/11 spouses and children 7 years ago. By working closely with Senator Cotton's office, both senators have secured all victims harmed by state-sponsored terrorist acts will now benefit from the USVSSTF. Their ability to work with members across the aisle illustrates bipartisanship is not only possible, but also necessary for success. During the final days leading up to the Menendez-Cotton Amendment vote onto the omnibus, Senator Menendez and his staff continued working into the wee hours of the night, negotiating terms of the amendment. And I know with certainty an agreement never could have been reached without the Senator directing his staff to keep his commitment to get it over the finish line. On behalf of my 3 children, Thomas, Caitlin, and Justin, and those who could not be here today in person, thank you, Senator Menendez, for never forgetting those who perished on September 11th and those left behind. Thank you.
And next is Anthony Gardner, whose brother Harvey was killed on September 11th and who works on the September 11th health fund, I understand. So,
Thank you, Senator Menendez. My brother Harvey was just 35 years old when he was killed at the World Trade Center on 9/11. Despite the passage of time, our family thinks of him every day with love, gratitude, and pride. The courage, heart, and kindness that he showed on 9/11 and throughout his life will always inspire us. I'm here today to express our gratitude and appreciation to Senator Menendez, Senator Booker, Leader Schumer, Senator Cotton, Senator Cornyn, their staffs, and all of our leaders in the Senate and House who championed the Fairness for 9/11 Families Act and ensured it became law. This bipartisan effort is a reminder of what can be accomplished when our leaders, regardless of party affiliation, come together to address issues and right injustices. In addition to providing catch-up payments for 9/11 victims, spouses, and dependents who were excluded from the USV SST, this new law also provides compensation for other victims of terrorism, as well as funding for other 9/11 claimants. Importantly, this additional funding and the law's provision, as Senator Menendez mentioned, for a GAO study to assess future funding sources for the USV SST is a great first step toward ensuring that the USV SST will one day have the required funds it needs to fulfill its mandate, to provide a meaningful measure of justice for all those impacted by state-sponsored terrorism. It has been more than 2 decades since my brother Harvey was murdered on 9/11, and the time and justice for accountability for all the 9/11 victims is long overdue. As a lifelong New Jerseyan, I'm proud to have Senator Menendez as my senator. I look forward to supporting Senator Menendez and all of our other champions in the Senate and the House, and all of our family advocate leaders like Terry Strada and the others that you've heard from today, who have been real inspirations for all of us in the community, where they've been able to channel their actions and their loss of their loved ones into positive change for others in the community. As they all continue to work toward that ultimate goal of securing justice and accountability for those impacted by 9/11 and other senseless acts of terrorism. Thank you.
And our last speaker is Judith Young. She is the president and chairperson of the American Gold Star Mothers National Monument. Judith.
Thank you, Senator. I didn't find out till last night that I was supposed to say anything, so I don't have anything prepared. And I am the senior of all these people here at this point. My son Jeffrey was a U.S. Marine. He was one of the 220 Marines that was killed, along with the 18 sailors and 3 soldiers on October the 23rd, 1983. This October, we will mark the 40th anniversary. The Beirut bombing was the second of the bombings by the terrorists. The first one was the embassy on April the 18th, and then the following year in September, the embassy in Beirut was hit again. So we had been hit 3 times, and this was the first time we'd ever heard of the word, more or less, terrorism. This was a new kind of warfare. And I have to say, being hit 3 times in Beirut and we did nothing, when 9/11 happened, I was angry because we should have done something back in 1983, and we did not. We actually had one of our survivors from the Marine barracks who was a fireman who did his duty and ran into one of the towers and was killed. So we were very proud of his actions. But Senator Menendez has been with us for, well, we've been at this for I don't know how many years now. When we first said, we want to sue a country. I said, oh, you can't do that. You can't sue a country. I said, sure we can. And we had all kinds of legislative, we even had the Supreme Court rule in our favor. So it's been a long, long road. So to be included in this bill, the rest of the families, the Colbert Towers, has been very instrumental for me. Thank you very much, Senator Menendez. It would be nice to be able to say that there'd be no more terrorism, but I'm afraid that's not the case. That's the new way that we have to learn to live, and we've all had to change. And we all miss our loved ones. I mean, there are other, I can remember the Pan Am 103. They sued. They actually got their funds from the country that acknowledged the fact that it was their fault. And our aim was to make Iran pay, and we did. And we took them to court, thanks to Senator Menendez on that one too. So I want to thank you for this time today, and I'm sure that we would all like to be able to say we would never like to be here again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Best speeches are the ones that are not prepared. So, best speeches are the ones that are not prepared. You did a great job. So, let me just acknowledge Craig Guy from the County Executive's Office, who is here with us, and Commissioner Romano, whose district we're in. So, thank you both for joining us today. I have a request to just very briefly explain what we're doing here in Spanish for the Spanish press. I'll do that very briefly. Estamos aquí hoy reunidos con las familias de septiembre de 11 que sufrieron, más de 3,000 americanos que fueron en ese día asesinados, y de los cuales 750 son del estado de New Jersey. Estas familias lo que han buscado es justicia, y hoy celebramos una ley que le da la oportunidad de ellos ser compensados por la pérdida de sus familias. Nunca va a haber suficiente dinero para restaurar la vida de esos padres y madres, hermanos y hermanas, de todos esos que fueron parte de ese día trágico. Pero hoy creamos un indicio de justicia, creando una vía a la compensación, y también para esos que han sido víctimas de otro terrorismo, con nuestros marinos que fueron parte de los ataques terrorísticos en Líbano y en otras partes del mundo. Y seguiremos en esta lucha but I could add with detail. With that, I'm happy to answer any on-topic questions first, and then any off-topic questions, I'll take it away from the podium.
Senator, on the 9/11 families, keeping with honesty, accountability, and trust, there was a report out that George Santos' mother, Fatima DeVolder, was not in New York during the September 11th attacks, as he previously claimed. Have any 9/11 families expressed their opinion to you, sir? And what is your opinion on this really
I don't have an opinion on it. I'm not here to deal with that issue. We're here to celebrate a moment in a dark tragedy, and Mr. Santos will ultimately have to deal with whatever is the truth of his circumstances, but I have no opinion.
Why were these families previously left out of the fund? And second question, do you have a target for annual consistent funding of this fund?
They were wrongfully left out of the fund. There was a determination that they should not be included in the victims' fund. It was a wrongful determination which Congress corrected. However, when Congress corrected it and did right by these families, 2 distributions had already been made, and these families were left out of those distributions. The legislation that we are celebrating the passage into law of today makes those restitutions and those families whole as it relates to that. As it relates to funding stream, that's why the GAO, the Government Accountability Office study, is so important, to find ways in which we can continuously fuel the resources, the monies into this fund, so that present victims and future victims can be taken care of. And we look forward to the GAO report finding and suggesting ways. So it's not for me to say we need X number of dollars, right? Even when we did this legislation, we got a GAO report to create the parameters of how much money was needed. We didn't just pick a number from the sky. And so we looked to the Government Accountability Report to suggest ways, and once we have those suggestions, I will look forward to working with colleagues to implement them.
What's the timing on that study?
I forget if we created a time frame for them, but I think it's within a year, possibly less, but within a year.
Senator, forgive me if you've answered this question. I was trying to find a parking space and missed the beginning. Can you address how many families are impacted by this and what those numbers look like in terms of money? Of course, you know, that's no compensation, as you said, for a loss of life, but
Right.
what are we talking about?
So I don't have the exact number. I don't know if any of the families have an exact number, but I can have my staff give you a sense of that. And in terms of money, the $6 billion goes towards meeting the paybacks, meaning the 2 rounds of distribution that didn't take place, the distributions to those in Khobar towers, as well as the other attacks, and then the amount that we expect that is a residual after all of that, which is about $2 billion of the $6 billion, then we will work on that. But I'd be happy to have my staff work to give you specific, as best as we know, specific numbers of who will be covered. I will say, since you asked that question, I've talked about my staff, you know, all of this doesn't happen by yourself. I've already said that the families were the driving force. But there are 2 people who worked extraordinarily hard, among many within my staff, and I should recognize them because they put their heart and soul in this. Rebecca Schatz, who is my legislative director, she put her heart and soul into this, and so I call her Saint Rebecca because she wouldn't leave me alone to talk to somebody on our colleagues on the other side to find a way forward. And Jason Tuber, who is here, our chief of staff, who was involved in some intimate negotiations as we got to the very end with other offices as well. I appreciate their work in making this thing happen. Any other on-topic questions? Yes.
Do you consider 9/11 state-sponsored terror, and who is the state sponsor?
I do consider 9/11 state-sponsored terror. I believe that those individuals could not have acted out without the assistance of a larger entity, which I believe to be a government. And I think that the truth comes by having the transparency that Terry spoke about, which is our legislation that opened the door for President Biden to release a fair number of documents that are critical for us to know as the American people the truth. And secondly, for the families to be able to continue to litigate successfully in court beyond the victims fund. But we're not satisfied that while the president did release a very significant amount of documents, we will continue to push for ultimate transparency. That transparency, is what's going to dictate the answer to the second part of your question, who it is. But if you look at where the individuals came from, if you look at the history here, we have strong reasons to believe that the government of Saudi Arabia was behind these individuals in some form, in some way, at some level. Now, all that information will dictate the information we have to ascertain what was the form, what was the way, and what was the level. Any other on-topic questions? If not, let me thank